Thank you very much. It is no easy task to follow the spirit of the silk. I did, however, think about one connection. You very beautifully told about the spirit of the subjects that you are manipulating. In a way, I'm also going to talk about some puppet masters. I don't think they were ever very concerned about the spirits of the human beings they were manipulating. But that was already one extra minute out of the window. You may have noticed that something has happened to the public debate. There is a certain four-letter word that has become more and more frequent. It starts with an F. You will hear it more often than you like if you are well behaved. It covers actually an activity that is extremely popular worldwide, connected to passion. But very few decent people like you and me would really like to be associated with it openly in the public domain. I am, as you have of course guessed, referring to FIFA. Which is the world's only governing body of football. FIFA, which another F institution, the FBI, calls a racketeer-influenced and corrupt organization, a so-called RICO, in its indictment of around 40 of FIFA's most prominent leaders. Being world leaders of the most globally loved sport, which is played, as we saw very beautifully, by millions of boys and girls in courtyards and parks, and apparently also in front of holy cows, and which is watched by billions of fans on the TV sets during its biggest events. How could FIFA top people manage not to become the most loved political figures in the world? How could this man, who invented the most flourishing industry in Olympic sport, the former FIFA president João Avelange, how could he 2 days ago celebrate his 100th birthday in Rio de Janeiro in almost absolute isolation, while his former friends and the whole sports establishment of today was looking in the other direction? What went wrong for football and what went wrong for many other Olympic sports? That is one of the questions I'll go back to, but at first I will just try to argue for three main claims. One claim is that there's much more to sport than meets the TV screen, and that is why freedom of expression is as important in sport as in any other walk of life. 2, sport should encourage and protect those who blow the whistle, even if they don't wear a referee's uniform. And 3, we need a fundamental reorganization of world sport in order to better support what the 195 member states of UNESCO decided in Paris half a year ago in a new international charter on sport and physical activity. Says that every human being has a fundamental right to physical education, physical activity and sport without discrimination of any kind. If you take a look at this new charter, you may be overwhelmed by reading all the good things that can be accomplished through sport, from individual capacity building over teamwork, cultural understanding, community development, and peace among people. I was one of those who were privileged to be a co-editor of this charter, and I discreetly draw your attention to the little word can, because that is essential. Because it is presumptuous to claim, like many sports leaders do, that sport is inherently good, that it inevitably fosters peace among nations, that it promotes understanding between cultures by a finger snap, and that it makes young people automatically behave better. Take a look at your TV screen and you will see young people who are always not behaving well in sport. What is true, however, is that sport is a very powerful tool at our disposal. It is so because it draws strength from some of our most basic instincts and emotions. It focuses our mental and physical energy. It sets up frameworks within which we can test ourselves as individuals or as teams. It allows us to meet each other in very direct physical ways, and it surely has the ability to unite the global attention on a few occasions. But whether it produces harm or perform wonders will all depend on how we use this forceful tool. Sport is neither good nor bad. It is in our hands. We are often told that sport as we know it today has its roots in ancient Greece, and it leaves the impression it's more or less a permanent element of human civilization. But that's a fraud. In reality, modern sport is only around 150 years old, less so for most of it. And actually, right now, as we speak, it may be fading in front of our eyes. Today, the growth in physical exercise in most of the world takes place outside the traditional sport clubs, as people increasingly prefer to do fitness in a private gyms, jog in the parks, do yoga in the evening school, ride mountain biking in the woods, or surf at the coast. But what is permanent through human history is that we have a body, and this body has an impulse to move. That inevitably leads to movement that must find a form, and that form varies from century to century, from culture to culture, from person to person. We shape our movement culture in ways that reflect the norms and ideals that we wish to guide our individual and collective lives. The nobility in the 18th century, they would be training fencing, horse vault, and minuets, reflecting the desire for elegance, artistry, and symmetry. Today, you will find those disciplines in circus. Later, gymnastics became essential in the nation building of many European countries for a variety of reasons, like, for instance, Germany and the Scandinavian countries, perhaps also Holland. But we can say in our times that we can find traditional games like the Buzkashi in Afghanistan, where riders fight over a headless goat or calf. We had Kabaddi, an advanced tag game from India. And we have capoeira in Brazil, which is a very musical form of martial art. Those are three very different ways of expressing norms and ideals and cultural frameworks. Broadly speaking, sport and our movement culture is an intense, never-ending battlefield about values and norms. And that is why freedom of expression is just as essential in sport as in other areas of life. Because from the day we are born and start interacting with our human beings, the movement culture is engraved into our minds and bodies. Every citizen, every athlete, every association should be entitled to discuss and decide about their own sporting life and enjoy the fullest possible freedom to choose and realize the values that they believe in with due consideration for others. In theory, there's a direct link between the individual athlete and the top of the world sport through a system of local, national, international associations ruled by representative democracy. In real life, the international governing bodies live in splendid isolation from their athlete members, and the most basic provisions for democracy are most often neglected. If sound democratic decision-making is based on dialogue and facts, you may wonder why sport has no room for ensuring dialogue and seek a broadly accepted truth in the corridors of power. And this is where Play the Game comes into the picture. We started as a journalistic initiative to develop sports journalism, but it was really not on purpose. It became so much broader. Because we started gathering people in these international conferences and undertake various communication research projects in order to promote democracy, transparency, and freedom of expression in sport. You may say that we have tested the power of the word in a culture of silence. This quote from the American whistleblower Edward Snowden, I find it's brilliant. It's a perfect summary of my own experience, and one I know I share with many of the impressive whistleblowers and journalists that Play the Game has hosted over 9 conferences so far. It's not about who you are, it's about what you have seen. It is circumstances that make you a whistleblower. And it takes a long time. These are the people, those whistleblowers that have been at our conferences, that when times were tough, have motivated me to stay working for much longer than a career consultant would find advisable. They have constantly inspired me by their love for the truth, their dogged determination, and their ability to dig up documentation for every single public claim. Let me introduce just a handful of them. One of the most impressive witnesses through the years is the Italian doping detective, not an official title, Sandro Donati, whose only formal education is that of an athletics trainer. He has nevertheless outdone most other experts in the field since one day over 30 years ago, when he found out that the Finnish middle distance runners whose training he had written a book about in admiration, they were in reality running on blood doping. Feeling betrayed, Donati started fighting systemic doping in Italian and international sport relentlessly. Among many achievements, he revealed how the Italian Olympic Committee, CONI, spent anti-doping money on experimenting with the use of EPO, making the University of Ferrara a hotspot, a favorite place to visit for international stars in cycling, skiing, and other endurance sports. Donati also investigated drug dealers. On this picture, he is unfolding a 10-meter-long Excel sheet with very little types listing doping sales from just one Italian pharmacy in Bologna. 10 years ago, he showed Play the Game a world map of doping trade routes, a gigantic illegal industry. He used open sources. Everybody could have done it, but he did it. And he showed how the production and distribution of sports drugs were in the hands of the same organized crime groups that also trade women, weapons, narcotics, and counterfeit products. As a direct result of this presentation, the World Anti-Doping Agency started asking cooperation with Interpol. Donati's own employers at CONI, they were not happy. They tried the best they could to get rid of him by planting false positive doping tests on runners trained by him, by displacing him to the Office of Children's Sport for a while, and by raising 11 court cases against him and losing them all. Today, Donati is in retirement from CONI, but not from his anti-doping activism, and that activism is still needed. Half a year ago, when I opened our 2015 conference, I had a Skype conversation with Yulia and Vitaly Stepanov. That young family had originally accepted to join our conference and tell the story, but for reasons of personal security, they had to cancel. Not even I know in which country they were when they talked to our audience from a blinded car. I only know that they were not in their native Russia, because in that country, Vitaly and Yulia are widely portrayed as national traitors after they testified to the German ARD TV about systemic doping and corruption in Russian and international athletics. You may have heard about that story. Their claims are very well documented and supported by an independent water report, but that is not enough to help them to get back home. And may I add, I read today that they are also now revealing that the Russian intelligence service was involved in the anti-doping control laboratories during the Sochi Olympics in 2014. That is another Russian whistleblower that has communicated this to them, and I don't think that will be very helpful for their situation. But they simply want the truth to get out. Organized crime is not only an essential factor in doping, but also in the phenomenon match fixing. That was the Canadian investigative journalist, now also a PhD, Declan Hill, who was the first to warn against a tsunami of fixing that threatened to destroy professional sport as we know it. Cheating is as old as sport itself, but the internet has opened endless opportunities for online gambling and criminal operations across national borders. Declan Hill's warning happened at our conference in 2005, but it took more than 5 years before international sport started really taking it seriously. Meanwhile, the mafia groups that control the fixes from their bases in Southeast Asia and Russia, among others, have consolidated their position, and that position is incredibly strong. Unregulated and illegal bookmakers that they do not publish annual accounts. But industry experts estimate that the global market for non-regulated betting on football alone is worth around $1 trillion. I know for astronomers and brain scientists, it's a very small figure, but I think with regards to economy, it's noteworthy. You may then add tennis, cricket, badminton, handball, and any other sport that can be subject of betting to that market. And out of such a turnover, it's not the profit, it is the turnover, but still you can easily find a budget to fix sports competitions and matches all over the world. Thanks to Hill and those who followed up on his warning, 48 countries in the Council of Europe signed an open international convention against the manipulation of sports competitions. But the problem is that very few nations have actually implemented it, and the problem will continue until the governments in Southeast Asia decide to join in. This will imply that they confront the most fervent passions of their voters and that they upset one of their biggest local industries. So don't hold your breath. A daring woman, Bonita Mercedes from Australia, lost her job as the head of the Corporate and Public Affairs of Australian Football Federation because she raised questions, Soccer Federation, because she raised questions about the ways Australia campaigned to get the FIFA World Cup in 2022. She did not find it a very good idea to send private consultants out to African and Asian countries with $1 million budget for unspecified purposes. Since that, she has been slandered in all kinds of ways, and her confidential statement to FIFA investigators were published worldwide by FIFA, breaking all guarantees of discretion, and while they at the same time disqualified the statement from her and another female whistleblower. Welcome as a whistleblower. She is now one of the founders of the new FIFA Now campaign. The most tragic destiny we have seen so far has come out of World Volleyball, one of the most popular sports globally. Its federation, FIVB, is still suffering from the legacy left by its former president, Ruben Acosta from Mexico, who retired in 2008. He introduced some very special rules. One, that every person who signs a contract on behalf of volleyball can get a 10% personal commission. Second rule, the president signs all contracts. It is proven that Acosta and his flamboyant wife, who also controlled a lot without really being elected, helped himself to at least $33 million this way, and he has now taken the IFB to court to ask for more. In contrast, the man who started blowing the whistle on Acosta 14 years ago, documenting his appalling corruption to the world public at our Play the Game conference in 2005, has had a bitter fate. First, he and his whole Argentine federation were expelled from all volleyball activities because of his criticism, and the EFIVB refused to pay more than $800,000 back to Argentina for hosting the World Cup in 2002. Unfortunately, Argentina was a country in deep crisis at the time, and Goichman was personally liable for all that money. Today, Mario Goichman, once a powerful businessman, lives under pitiful conditions outside Buenos Aires, financially and psychologically ruined, evicted by force from his house, deprived of all personal possessions, and a living example, some would say, an example of warning, if you break with your family, of the risk, a living example of the risk that whistleblowers in sport run. We have taken his case to all relevant international bodies in sport, and there's one unanimous answer: silence. Well, I cannot mention whistleblowers without a tribute to the one person whose work I've had to defend almost every week since he gave the very first opening speech at our Play the Game conference in 1997. The hard-working, colorful, and unstoppable Scottish journalist Andrew Jennings, who uncovered Olympic corruption and fascist tendencies in the International Olympic Committee in the 1990s and later through his love at FIFA. That love was not returned. Over and over again, I have been told that Andrew Jennings' outspoken attacks and tabloid language was counterproductive, and even anti-corruption leaders warned me that his presence was harming the credibility of Play the Game. My answer every single time was that I would be more than happy to disinvite Andrew Jennings, who is, here fighting FIFA's communication director in the corridors of Play the Game. Well, I would be happy to disinvite him if his critics could just give me a name of an alternative person who could provide the same rock-solid documentation for what happened in FIFA. These persons never materialized. It was his writings that drew the FBI's attention to FIFA, so when today I read how the Swiss and American prosecutors officially describe Sepp Blatter's FIFA, and when I hold it up against what Andrew Jennings has told us over 15 years, I can have short passing moments of personal pride. Andrew Jennings and all the other whistleblowers have one thing in common. They have been marginalized and demonized by the Olympic and sports movement, who would tell me personally, and everybody else who listened, that they were negative persons who sought personal profit and prestige by unfounded attacks on the good sport. The fact is that even if we have heard a lot of Play the Game, not one whistleblower have exaggerated. If I can hold anything against them, it is that they underestimated the true scale of the scandals they uncovered. When first the police entered, then we saw things that nobody would really believe. So, what conclusion can we draw for the future of sport? I think it is fair to say that corruption in sport is systemic. The business model built by Avalanche and FIFA 40 years ago was soon copied by other federations, and corruption was a built-in purpose. Not all federations are, of course, corrupt, but last year, together with KU Leuven, we published the Sports Governance Observer Report. I also have a copy here, if any sports political nerds are present. And it showed that most Olympic federations suffer from very poor governance standards, I would say almost all. For instance, most of them do not publish their financial reports. They distribute money according to opaque criteria, and presidents can be re-elected until they drop off the perch. So how did these international sport federations become ideal growth houses for sleazy behavior? Firstly, they have a very attractive TV entertainment product to sell. They have a de facto monopoly on its product and undisputed control over the market. And the ruling culture is that of a family where we do not contradict what daddy says. Most importantly, sport is organized from top to bottom as private organizations enjoying the same freedom privileges as the local Korfball association. Most of these federations have their headquarters in Switzerland, which only last year changed its laws in order to make private corruption a criminal offense. I'll be very short. The sports system and the sports policies as we know them today need fundamental reform if we wish to address a number of dramatic challenges. Corruption from the insides, the threats from the outside, doping and match fixing, the mafia, the growing public outrage as seen in Brazil here with the way money is spent and civic rights deprived during the global events, and the new patterns in the movement culture that have no spokespersons, no or very few organizations, typically not the one that the politicians listen to. They listen to the IOC because they always did so, and gold medals is a nice thing to look at. Play the Game has played a role, perhaps sometimes an important role, in breaking the silence that covered all these challenges. And we are, of course, encouraged today when we see governmental organizations like the EU, the Council of Europe, UNESCO, a wide range of NGOs, and even many initiatives inside the Olympic family, they finally discuss all these challenges openly. The agenda has changed in the past 5 years, and there is no going back. However, it is too early to celebrate. We still do not know if the new talk of the town will also create real change. Will FIFA be able to reform its own deeply ingrained culture of corruption? Will the IOC confront systemic cheating and corruption also when it's carried out by big and powerful countries? Will governments start investing in a grassroots sport with many colors and faces? I'm neither an optimist or a pessimist, but I'm sure that we have to keep freedom of expression and an open public dialogue alive as a precondition for improving sport. Because sport is a very powerful tool for the development of mankind, and it lies in our hands. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Jens. Thanks very much. Keep blowing the whistle and keep digging, and keep sports clean, or make it clean.